Most people who spend hours scrolling through their feeds every day are not aware of what is really happening inside them. They believe they are just killing time, relaxing, or trying to distract themselves a bit after a tough day. But behind every seemingly harmless scrolling gesture, there is a deep psychological mechanism that escapes conscious perception. It is not about technology addiction. This explanation, while popular, is too superficial. According to South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han, the true root of compulsive behavior in the digital environment is not the technology itself, but the way our lives have lost density, beauty, and presence. In other words, scrolling is not the cause of emptiness. It is the symptom. We live in a time when reality has lost its charm. Days are mechanical. Sensory experiences are minimal. Routine has become predictable, automated, monotonous. Human interactions are increasingly mediated by screens. The body lives in alertness, but without presence. The mind is constantly occupied, but not engaged. And it is in this scenario that the brain, craving meaningful stimulation, turns to the digital as an escape valve. Not because it wants to, but because it has nothing better. Byung-Chul Han calls this phenomenon the hell of the identical, a reality where everything repeats without transformation, where the different has been tamed, where life has lost the ability to surprise. Scrolling, in this context, is not just a pastime. It is a narcotic. It is not sought after because it is good, but because the rest of life seems unbearably bland. This is the central thesis of this video. You do not need more discipline to stop using your phone. You do not need more focus, more willpower, or more productivity techniques. What you need is a life so interesting, rich, sensory, and vibrant that the feed seems boring. A life that stimulates the senses, that truly engages your attention, that reconnects you with natural rhythms, contemplative practices, aesthetic experiences, and real human connections. Because when reality becomes more engaging than simulation, the digital loses its anesthetic function. And that is when the miracle happens. Scrolling ceases to be a desire. It simply becomes unnecessary. In this video, we will dive deeply into this phenomenon. We will understand why the modern brain is trapped in the cycle of digital stimulation, what the absence of real experiences has done to the human mind, and, most importantly, how to rebuild a life that is, in fact, too good to be ignored. Get ready to face uncomfortable but liberating truths. Because perhaps what keeps you attached to your phone is not addiction, but a reality that has stopped touching you. There is a subtle yet profoundly transformative detail that most people completely overlook. The human brain does not seek only stimulation. It seeks beauty. Stimulation alone is cheap, repetitive, and addictive, like a social media feed. Beauty, even when small, is nourishing. It reorganizes the mind. It anchors the body in the present. It reminds the nervous system that there is something beyond urgency, fatigue, and function. Byung-Chul Han argues that modern society has lost the ability to experience the beautiful because it has moved away from rituals, contemplation, and silence. Everything has become utilitarian, fast, immediate. And in this process, we have stopped noticing that beauty is not found in great works of art or epic landscapes, but in the small details of everyday life, what he calls micro-aesthetic experiences. When you ignore these subtleties, your mind becomes opaque. When you recover them, something within you awakens. Starting to incorporate beauty into everyday life is a revolutionary gesture, and incredibly simple. It is having breakfast, sitting down, in silence, with a beautiful plate and a cup you like, even if it's just a slice of bread. It is playing a song you love and really listening to it attentively as if you were at a concert. It is changing your route to work just to see a different street, passing by a tree, observing how the morning light touches the sidewalk. It is noticing the details of a beloved face. It is stopping for 2 minutes to look at the sky and trying to describe it in your mind. These gestures are not meant to escape the digital. They serve to replace cheap, addictive stimulation with something of depth, texture, and presence. It is a quality substitution, not repression. The brain, when nourished by these small doses of real beauty, loses its appetite for digital fast food, because the feed has no smell, it has no texture, it has no depth. Scrolling suddenly starts to seem artificial. There is a basic principle in neuroscience called aesthetic value-driven attention. In simple terms, the brain pays more attention to what it considers beautiful, harmonious, and pleasant. And this attention, when prolonged, generates states of presence and pleasure that are exactly the opposite of the anxious dispersion promoted by social networks. By placing beauty at the center of your day, you activate this circuit. And over time, the digital world loses its power, not through discipline, but through disinterest. Therefore, do not underestimate the power of a lit candle, a clean towel, or a song played with intention. These details are small sensory revolutions. They are discrete rituals that tell the brain, it's worth staying here. This is interesting. This is beautiful. And when the real becomes beautiful again, the virtual becomes unnecessary. But for beauty to have space, it needs structure. And that's where the next step comes in, ritualizing the beginning and end of your day. Because without rituals, everything becomes routine. And routine without awareness is the fertile ground for boredom. In the next part, you will learn how to replace moments of automatic scrolling with simple yet powerful rituals that reclaim the meaning of everyday life and restore presence to your mind. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. The modern human has lost the ability to transition between moments of the day with awareness. In the past, even without realizing it, people created pauses and rituals between one cycle and another. They lit a candle before sleeping, washed their face upon waking, walked in silence to work, shared meals with family. These small rituals served as psychic markers, symbolic ways to signal to the brain that one phase has ended and another has begun. Today, that structure has disappeared, and in its place, scrolling has taken over. What many people do not realize is that the moment you most surrender to the screen, upon waking and before sleeping, is precisely when your mind is most vulnerable. The freshly awakened brain is still in slower brainwave patterns, close to a meditative state. It is in this interval that the nervous system orients itself, organizes reality, and regulates mood. But when the first thing you do upon waking is open your phone, you surrender this sacred window to informational chaos. The same logic applies at the end of the day. You finish your activities, lie down in bed, and instead of signaling to your body that it is time to rest, you offer artificial light, excessive stimuli, and social comparison. The result? An accelerated mind, fragmented sleep, and a following day already starting with exhaustion. Byung-Chul Han argues that the absence of rituals is one of the central factors in the desacralization of time, a phenomenon where days become indistinguishable, mechanical, and without texture. It's as if you are living in an eternal loop without edges. And scrolling, in these moments, is an anesthetic. It not only numbs, but also robs any chance for life to take shape. The solution? Rebuild your own rituals, deliberately, with intention. Opening rituals. Upon waking, before touching your phone, sit on the bed and take deep breaths for 2 minutes. Do a brief stretch. Observe your body. Prepare tea or coffee slowly and drink while looking out the window, without haste, without talking, without digital stimuli. Play some light instrumental music while getting ready, as if you were preparing for a small sacred ritual, not just for another day. Closing rituals. Turn off screens 30 minutes before sleeping. Take a notebook and write down 3 small things you noticed during the day. They don't have to be anything grand. The afternoon light, a brief conversation, the smell of food. Set an indirect light, perhaps a candle. Breathe. Spend 5 minutes in silence. And then, just sleep. No feed, no videos, no noise. What does this do? It creates margin. It creates form. And where there is form, there is presence. These rituals are not about being productive or living in Zen mode. They are about reclaiming a sense of reality. They return to the body the experience of being alive. And by doing this, they reduce the appeal of the digital, which begins to seem increasingly unnecessary, artificial, and above all, superficial. But creating rituals is not enough if your attention is already fragmented. If your brain no longer knows how to delve into anything, even the most beautiful moments will go unnoticed. That's why, in the next part, we will talk about a powerful practice, perhaps the most transformative of all, reserving a moment of the day to experience deep absorption in something real. This may be the key to restoring your focus and finally regaining the pleasure of existing in the here and now. One of the most silent and dangerous symptoms of modern life is the inability to lose oneself completely in a single thing. We live in a state of diluted, fragmented, hyper-stimulated attention, where nothing is deep enough to capture us entirely. And because of this, everything feels insufficient. This is one of the central reasons why scrolling has become so addictive. It feeds a brain that no longer knows how to concentrate, offering small doses of novelty, one after another, at an increasing speed. But this stimulation does not fill, it only disperses. Byung-Chul Han argues that contemporary society has transformed human experience into a succession of impulses, clicks, and immediate responses. In this logic, we lose what he calls contemplative capacity, the ability to sustain attention on a single object, gesture, or idea for an extended period. And this comes at a high psychological cost. When you can no longer deeply absorb something, your mind remains in a constant state of restlessness. You start seeking more and more external stimulation, not because you are interested, but because you are desperate for something that finally captures your attention. But nothing captures it, because you are no longer trained to dive deep, only to glide. Recovering the capacity for deep absorption is not just a creative luxury or a spiritual practice. It is a form of psychological survival. It means training the brain to find pleasure in immersion, in detail, in continuity. It is reminding the body that it can rest within a task, that it can lose itself without fear, that it can exist without needing to jump from stimulus to stimulus like a cornered animal. Every day, choose a single activity to practice this dive. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be preparing a meal from scratch, focusing on each cut, aroma, and texture. It could be reading a novel that pulls you into the story, without interruptions, without notifications, without switching between tabs. It could be drawing, painting, playing an instrument, caring for a plant, or organizing something with your hands. What matters is not the final result. It is the state that this activity provokes. The feeling that, for a few minutes or hours, time has disappeared. You weren't thinking about anything else. You didn't want to look at your phone. You didn't want to respond to messages. You were whole. And this, today, is almost a miracle. This kind of presence cannot be reproduced by short videos, timelines, or feeds. It requires real time, real body, real experience. When you experience this kind of immersion, even for 30 minutes a day, you reactivate a part of the mind that has been dormant. And this part, once awakened, begins to reject shallow stimulation. It starts to feel uncomfortable with digital superficiality. It begins to desire depth again. The truth is that the human mind was made to dive. The current hyperstimulation is not natural. It is a distortion. And the more you train your absorption in something tangible, the more you shift pleasure from the screen to the real world. Gradually, scrolling begins to seem boring, repetitive, too small for the size of your attention. But this reconstruction is not complete while you are still separated from what most regulates the rhythm of the human body, nature. The natural world, with its colors, sounds, textures, and silences, offers the kind of deep, contemplative, and harmonious stimulation that no technology can simulate. Therefore, in the next part, we will explore why reconnecting with the natural world, even for a few minutes a day, can be the most powerful step to make real life more interesting than any simulation. In the midst of concrete, haste, noise, and the artificiality of modern daily life, nature has become a forgotten luxury. Most people spend days, sometimes weeks, without putting their bare feet on the ground, without looking directly at the sky, without touching something that hasn't been manufactured. And the most alarming thing is that they don't even realize what they are missing. The human body, the human mind, human attention. All of this evolved in close contact with the natural world. When we disconnect from nature, we don't just lose trees, sun, and wind. We lose rhythm, we lose presence, we lose mental health. Byung-Chul Han points out that contemporary society has lost the rituals of transition between natural cycles. Day and night have ceased to have meaning because screens illuminate the early morning as if it were noon. The seasons have been erased by constant air conditioning. Rain has become an inconvenience. Wind has become a distraction. Time has become a tyrant. And when there is no longer a connection with the rhythms of the world, the modern subject begins to live in a continuous and shallow present, where everything seems the same, and anxiety settles in as a permanent background noise. That is why deliberate exposure to nature is a radical form of healing. It is not a sensory indulgence. It is a physiological and psychological necessity. Walking outdoors for 20 minutes, without headphones, without podcasts, without music, just letting the eyes absorb the textures, the contrasts of light, the sound of birds, the rustling of leaves, is enough for the nervous system to slow down. Heart rate decreases, brain activity changes, attention begins to reorganize. And perhaps for the first time in the day, the subject finally feels present. But it's not just about going out to get some fresh air. It's about being in nature with intention, placing oneself as an observer, not as a user, noticing the movement of clouds, the imperfections of a leaf, the smell of the earth after rain. This type of experience activates in the brain a mode of contemplative attention that is the opposite of digital overstimulation. While scrolling fragments, nature unifies. While the feed accelerates, the wind soothes. While the screen fatigues, the green restores. And most importantly, nature is, by definition, unpredictable. One sky is never the same as the previous day. The sound of the wind varies. Colors change throughout the hours. This constant micro-variation is what subtly and profoundly nourishes the mind. By returning to nature, even for a few daily minutes, you restore to your perception a sense of real novelty. Not manufactured, not packaged by algorithms. Novelty that surprises, that nourishes, that truly satisfies. And perhaps you will notice something curious. After a few days of walking without distraction, your urge to grab your phone begins to diminish. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because something inside you begins to be filled again. However, this reconnection with the external reality also requires a reconnection with the internal reality. And most people, accustomed to constant distraction, have lost the ability to be with their own thoughts without fleeing. Therefore, in the next step, we will talk about what may be the most difficult challenge, but also the most transformative. Relearning to do absolutely nothing for a few minutes each day. because only when you are doing nothing do you truly begin to exist. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebooks. Beyond the Shadow breaks down Jung's core ideas, while Dialogues with the Unconscious gives you a 30-day path to apply them in your life. Both are linked in the pinned comment. For the modern mind, the idea of doing absolutely nothing seems absurd, useless, uncomfortable, intolerable. And yet, this may be one of the deepest and most restorative practices a human being can cultivate. In a world where every pause is automatically filled with digital stimulation, the simple act of sitting in silence for 5 minutes, without music, without a book, without conversation, without a phone, has become a radical gesture. We live in a culture that idolizes doing, where time is currency, productivity is virtue, and silence is confused with laziness. From a very early age, we learn that the value of a moment is tied to its utility. If it's not yielding, if it's not informing, if it's not entertaining, then it's being wasted. This is the perfect environment for scrolling to thrive. It fills every gap, every micro-void, every moment when reality falls silent for a second. Byung-Chul Han describes this as part of the collapse of negativity, the disappearance of everything that requires waiting, maturation, and interiority. The interval can no longer be tolerated. Boredom has become an enemy, slowness has become a defect, and the experience of simply being, of doing nothing, has become almost a pathology. But Han also points out, it is precisely in this empty space, in this unfilled silence, that the possibility of contemplation, creation, and more profoundly, listening to oneself is born. Practicing non-doing is to reconnect with one's internal time. It is to allow thoughts to come and go without distraction. It is to perceive the body, the breath, the initial restlessness, and to remain there nonetheless. In the first few days, it will be uncomfortable. The mind will crave stimulation. The body will seek an escape. But if you resist, if you sustain this emptiness for a few minutes, something begins to reorganize. You start to get accustomed to the pause, to the silence, to the simple fact of existing. And this has a direct effect on the urge to scroll, because scrolling is only attractive when silence is unbearable. When you learn to be with yourself without stimulation, the need to fill every second with digital dopamine disappears. You are no longer escaping. You are present. And presence, as paradoxical as it may seem, is deeply satisfying. Set aside 5 to 10 minutes a day just for this. Sit somewhere quiet, with nothing around. Don't try to meditate. Don't try to focus. Just be. Observe. Breathe. See what happens when you stop running. See what emerges when you don't try to control anything. Over time, these minutes of non-doing become an anchor, a refuge, a reminder that you are more than stimuli and responses. You are space, and within that space, life becomes habitable again. But the inner world only fully flourishes when the outer environment collaborates. And the truth is that many cannot escape the cycle of the digital because they are surrounded by an environment that constantly pulls them back. A visually poor environment, dominated by screens, filled with artificial stimuli and objects that do not invite presence. In the next part, we will understand how to reorganize this physical environment so that it becomes an ally in building a more contemplative, sensory, and satisfying life, and thus further weaken the appeal of the digital. You can change your habits, your routine, even your thoughts. But if the environment around you continues to be a constant invitation to distraction, sooner or later, it wins. Human beings are deeply influenced by the space they occupy. The brain constantly responds to visual, tactile, and auditory signals. And if these signals predominantly come from screens, artificial lights, notifications, digital interfaces, and soulless objects, Then no matter how hard you try, your attention will be constantly pulled away from yourself. That's why the last step in this journey is to deliberately design an analog environment, a space that favors the real, that invites presence, that stimulates sensory curiosity, contemplation, touch, sight, and silence. We are not talking about decorating your home with Instagram filters or creating a clean and productive space in the style of social media. We are talking about restoring to your environment what Byung-Chul Han calls symbolic thickness, objects and textures that carry meaning, history, beauty, and contemplative function. Keep physical books visible, with covers that visually attract you. Don't hide musical instruments or art materials. Bring them close, like silent invitations to create. Place a living plant in a prominent spot and observe its daily evolution. Choose objects with texture, wood, ceramics, fabric, paper, things that beg to be touched, not just looked at. Have a chair near the window with no function other than to sit and observe. Use soft, focused lighting that favors introspection rather than overexposure. You don't need to turn your home into a Zen temple, but you need to leave visual and sensory clues that the physical world still matters. That tangible reality still has beauty, density, and value. Because when the environment communicates this all the time, your brain begins to naturally reorient attention. And what was once impulsive, like checking your phone every 5 minutes, becomes misplaced, incoherent, almost rude. Reorganizing your physical space is like planting seeds of presence. You are saying, through the environment, here we live, here we feel, here we contemplate. And gradually, the digital loses its dominance. Not because you fight it, but because you have built something better. And that is what, deep down, you have been doing since the beginning of this video. Reconstructing reality, relearning to live, reconnecting with time, with the body, with silence, with beauty, with others, and with yourself. Not to go back to the past, but to rehumanize the present. Because the simplest and most powerful truth is this: you don't need to fight against the scrolling addiction. You need to build a life so dense, rich, alive, and meaningful that it simply loses its sense. If this video touched you in any way, write in the comments, "I am reconstructing my reality." This helps the algorithm, but mainly helps you to make a public commitment to this change. Now, I'm going to ask you to leave this video and go apply some of these tips. Go out, see something beautiful, walk, do anything disconnected from the internet. Tomorrow you come back here and tell me how the experience was. See you later.